a couple troubleshooting items. If you're calling in, please make sure that you don't have audio in two places. So if you're watching the video on the public input stream, make sure you have the stream muted. Otherwise, we get kind of this audio feedback loop going on, and it just ends up ringing through the chat a couple times. So I think if we have that covered, we're safe to go. And I'll turn it over to Allie, and we can go ahead and start the meeting.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for joining our first virtual meeting. We're the first CAC for the county to have this. You know, trying out how we can keep moving with our mostly with the most important business we have right now is the master plan revision. So I appreciate the county figuring out how to keep this going and letting us get to work. And so just bear with us if there's any technical difficulties or anything. And I also just wanted to say thank you to, like Doug suggested, thank you to the whole community. I personally have been really impressed with a lot of kindness and consideration and just helpfulness. And it's no surprise, but it's still nice to see how nice our neighbors are here. So thanks to everybody in Crozet, and I hope a few of you are watching, and we appreciate you, and we're glad to get together. So I have a few official things to read before we get started. This meeting is being held pursuant to and in compliance with Emergency Ordinance number 20-A6, an emergency ordinance to ensure the continuity of government during the COVID-19 disaster.
What? Yeah, I'm on a meeting. Yeah, I need you to go up there. Yeah.
Hi, Joe. So the committee members who are electronically present at this meeting are me, Allie Pesh, Costas Alavertis, Ann Malik, our supervisor, Brian Day, Doug Bates, Jenny Moore, our commissioner, Joe Four, Josh Rector, Matthew Slatz, Sean Bird, and Valerie Long. The persons responsible for receiving public comment are the Crozet Community Advisory Committee and the Albemarle County Department of Community Development. The opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting are posted on the Crozet Master Plan Update webpage at www.publicinput.com/imaginecrozet and on the Albemarle County calendar. And we also in our meeting have our neighborhood planner, Andrew Newpel, and his co-workers, Michaela Accardi, Rachel Falkenstein, and Serena Gruya, who are all in the community development department just to help us out here. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, and he's going to get started on the work session.
Great. Well, thank you all again. It's exciting to have this be our first meeting. I mentioned earlier that you all were the last group to meet in person before our world kind of changed 2 months ago. And you're all the first group that are back online. So we are certainly working through the whole logistics of this meeting. It's been a whole push from the entire county organization to get back online. But we're excited to try some new things. I think just bear with us, and to the members of the public joining us on public input tonight, you know, we're certainly trying to find ways to bring you in and make this really inclusive process. So we welcome all feedback. We're going to do our best to make sure this all goes off without a hitch. But I think we're just excited to be at this stage and be meeting again with you all. So I'm going to go ahead and start to share my screen so I can start to share some tonight's content with you. For the folks watching at home on public input, you should be able to view this YouTube stream. There are also some areas where you can leave comments as well in there. So we'll have a couple staff members that monitor that throughout the meeting, and hopefully that all goes well from there. So this is a work session focused on the master plan, obviously a really important piece of business before the CAC right now. And we've spent the past 2 months really working on finding ways that we could keep this process moving forward. The community development department is still open and working. Construction is still going on. plan remains just as timely as ever right now. So we're sure we can find a way to keep this project moving, and touching base with you all tonight is one of the first steps. I just want to check to see, can you all see the presentation on my screen right now? Great. Well, sounds good.
Andrew, can I also just add, I didn't say that that if committee members have something to say, you can use the raise hand button. And I'll try to keep track of that and make sure that everyone gets to speak in somewhat orderly fashion after Andrew does his presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And Allie will help facilitate the kind of discussion session as we get to that stage in the meeting. If you click on the participants button as well, there is a raise hand option and a go slower, go faster option as well. I anticipate you might need the go slower option. I'll do my best, but I understand that internet connectivity issues can be a challenge. Hopefully not too many words get dropped throughout all of this, but do your best to flag me if something goes wrong there. So we'll go ahead and get started. The agenda for tonight is really focused on this one work session item. We have kind of 3 parts. There'll be a break between each topic for discussion with AC and some opportunities to bring in questions and comments from members of the public as well. We'll start with an overview of the revised master plan process and a discussion about potential tweaks we can do to ensure this works well moving forward. There will be an opportunity for us to share some feedback that's been received so far from the master plan process. We know it's been a couple of months since we've had our last workshop, so we want to do some time to make sure you're caught up on everything. There will also be a discussion of the draft guiding principles and goals from the master plan so far, and we'll kind of sent along some drafts to you all tonight, and hopefully we'll have some time to go through all that with you all. So I'll go ahead and jump right into the process overview. As you're all aware, starting in mid-March, our world sort of changed with community engagement and our ability to conduct meetings in our traditional format. So this had some disruptions to our original timeline as we scoped it. We plan to have workshops in April and May as well, focus on connectivity and conservation. We had our special meeting with the CAC that was scheduled for the end of March, and we had to cancel that, as you all know. And this meeting sort of picks up where we left off with that. We've had to take some time to make sure that we can still cover the same content in a new format. We've had to explore some technology solutions to make this all potentially viable, such as making sure we have Zoom and public input that works well for us. But I think we're pretty excited about what we have moving forward. And I think this will keep us on track. So we'll have sort of a continuing same path with workshops that cover the content, provide the broadest opportunity for public input, and these kind of CAC virtual meeting work sessions, which will help us still kind of process the community feedback and keep work moving forward on the master plan. So on the back end of the process, this does impact our timeline a little bit. We obviously had to kind of stop our work for a couple months to really understand what was happening and make sure we can have the feedback that's really vital to this master plan process. So we did add a couple extra opportunities for public chapter reviews at the back end of the process to make sure that there is a chance to really gain a clear community understanding and buy-in of this master plan. And this does probably push the public hearings and adoptions back into early 2021, probably the February-March timeframe. So I think we're doing our best to keep this project moving. I think we're excited about the opportunities, but want to make sure that you all know how this impacts the overall process. There are two sort of engagement formats we're looking at. Again, the community workshops will be on the public input site we've used for the past couple workshops to provide input. It's going to cover the same amount of content. We did have to split connectivity into 2 workshops to make sure that there's a reasonable amount of content, aren't just trudging through a online input form for an hour, because that's much different than being at a workshop talking to people. So we had to make some adjustments there. We'll have a recorded presentation that goes with these input forms, and we'll have comment sections as well. That should allow a level of discussion there with the community. We'll have these open for about 3 weeks at a time. So I think that allows a pretty wide window of opportunity to share your thoughts as well. And I think that a benefit of the workshops, the way we're doing them, it could potentially expand access to folks who can't make a normal time. It does cover the same content we normally have online anyway, but I think we're excited to see about some of the opportunities with all this as well. We also plan to do the CAC meetings as sort of a work session with you all, using Zoom and public input as we're doing tonight. And this again being a chance to review community input, provide feedback to staff. I know that we've been really fortunate to have the Gazette's been recording our meetings for, I don't know how long, it's been going on for some time, and posting them on YouTube. This does certainly expand access to a lot of folks to watch from home. And I know that I believe I've heard with the board meetings that they've had almost 4 times their regular viewership right now. So I think there are some benefits there that we're excited about. As far as outreach, we recognize we have to get the word back out about this again, and that's a challenge we're working through right now. We also know that really flyering or putting signs out in the community doesn't work as well when people are mostly staying home, we hope. Some of the things we've used so far have included our usual county emailing list, social media platforms. We were really lucky to have a full page ad posted in the Crozet Gazette for this month. So thank you, Allie, and everyone that helped put that together to help share out some dates and general themes for that. And we also are planning to reach out to groups that might have a special stake in topics like trails or connectivity as well. So we'll plan to do that as well as those opportunities come up. Knowing that there are challenges with this format, we are working to make call-in options available for everyone that might not have reliable internet access. And for members of the community that might not be comfortable with using technology, I think we can certainly make a mailed version work just fine. We'll have to make that work. But I think we want to make sure that this remains open to everyone that's interested in participating. So at a really high level, that is the approach we've taken so far with getting this update started. And before we get too much further in the process, we wanted to bring that to you all and get some of your thoughts as the community members about kind of strategies we might be missing, any suggestions we could have to improve our outreach, and other opportunities we might be missing. We'd really appreciate your thoughts on how we adjust our approach, because I think we will be getting the hang of this for a little while, and we want to make sure that we are adapting and really rolling with everything that happens. So I will pause there and turn it over to Allie, and we can have a quick discussion on that. I think Allie will probably explain the rules again, but if you can raise your hand using the button on our participants, I think that's the easiest way for us to kind of set up a queue. But if not, just make sure that we try to avoid talking over each other. Make sure you unmute yourself when it's your turn to speak, and mute yourself when you're finished. So.
Yeah, so I see Jenny has something to say, but yeah, we'll just try to, if you don't see where you're supposed to raise your hand, unmute yourself and let us know, and otherwise just do that, and I'll try to keep track and call on people. So Jenny, what do you have?
I guess for the part about the targeted groups, I think that's a great idea, like you mentioning the trails and things like that. But I want to be sure, one of the last, I think it was the last meeting we had at Western, we broke out by neighborhoods. And so our neighborhood group was asked some questions about changes that other groups weren't asked. So I wasn't able to hear some of what went on in the different so I think because some of those, if you're asking for more density in some place or something like that, it's absolutely specific to surrounding neighborhoods, but it really is a whole growth area question because of impacts with traffic and things like that. So I wouldn't like to see targeting of groups used in that way when we have questions that really, even if it's not the neighborhood next to yours, I think everybody still wants to have input. So that's just my only comment about the targeting of groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Anne, did you have a comment?
I may have misunderstood. What I heard was using these different groups as a way to get more people to come into the format of the work session. And to go along with that, I think there is a pretty good list of homeowners associations. I can see who's missing and put it out to the committee for people to be able to add any neighborhoods that they know, so that we can benefit from any of this sort of tree distribution level of having 50 people on a list and then have them each send it to 50 more. That will really help us to make sure we're not missing as many people. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's it could be reaching more people. Doug?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer that we'll have the DCI circulate all this information on their email list as well.
Good, thanks. Joe? Did you have something?
Yeah. Didn't know if we were also posting this on like Nextdoor. I know that's a pretty popular thing, and I've seen recently that, for example, like the Department of Health officials have been posting things on their updates. So I don't know if that's an option either formally through the county or informally.
Yeah, I agree. I actually meant to post this meeting on Nextdoor and I just forgot, but it would be cool if the county has some way to do it more officially than just my personal account. But either way, and I'm definitely happy to get the schedule in the Gazette ongoing like we did this month. So, but yeah, Andrew, you can let me know if that's something possible. Otherwise, I'll just post it as CCAC, liaison on my own Nextdoor.
Yeah, I know that. I think we haven't done Nextdoor in the past. I think we can certainly look into if that's an option for us. But it looks like the organization is exploring using Nextdoor, and hopefully that can be a tool we can use. But as far as other mailing lists, we certainly appreciate, you all are more in touch with your HOAs and other groups that are active on the ground out in Crozet than I think we are from the county building. So if you have resources or mailing lists you can forward our content to, or you'd like us to help sign folks up, I think that's really helpful. If you want to shoot us an email, that should help cover us there.
Thanks. I don't see any other questions. Andrew, do you want to move on?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. So we'll go ahead on to the next topic. Thank you all. Great. So we'll start with our next section and talk a little bit about some of the recap we had from earlier this year, because I know we've covered a lot of content in those sessions. Some folks were in different groups as well. We did for a time constraint and just the pure volume of the content we wanted to go through. Obviously, we don't have the same constraints with an online input opportunity, so I think we're excited about that. But we did want to share out first with you all, just recap some of the information that we received and the community input we have. So you all should have received in package I sent out with the agenda, put together some kind of feedback summaries of everything, which include a lot of detailed information, some more specific information based on certain comments and feedback we received in these meetings. But we do want to proceed with just a high-level recap for anyone that might have missed that. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity to share your thoughts, ask clarifying questions, because we've really used this input to kind of determine some themes we want to explore more and figure out the organization of the master plan. So these workshops really focus on the character chapter, the land use chapter of the master plan. Includes topics such as our neighborhood centers, our commercial centers, kind of our rural edges, and then also our neighborhoods, our residential areas, and our housing supply in Crozet. So a pretty broad set of topics here. We did take a couple months to work through it, and we have some opportunities going on right now. So to jump all the way back to January, about 4 months ago today, we talked about our centers and our edges in Crozet. So our commercial centers mostly. I'll start with a recap of some of the themes we heard about downtown. We had a lot more detailed feedback. We did have a couple of focus groups with members of the downtown community that wrapped up with a report that went to the board earlier this month. With some high-level themes, they may or may not surprise you, included strong support for improved connectivity and local business. I think that is really consistent with a lot of information we have heard and known for a long time. But I'll emphasize the connectivity bit, especially bicycle pedestrian connectivity was a big focus. Why people wanting to be able to walk to from their neighborhoods to downtown, but also questions about transit and parking as well did emerge. We'll make sure to take those into consideration with the connectivity chapter that'll start in a couple weeks. As far as housing topics, we did hear some interest in prioritizing, again, in this downtown area, really mixed income and also low-rise housing types. So two different things there, just about who the housing is affordable to, but also the type of housing stock that's being built as well. We did have a conversation about land use in the master plan. We decided that this is, really the town center, the most important part, center in Crozet, and really a focal point for the community, and really the most urbanized, most intensely developed part of Crozet, which is consistent with a lot of feedback we've heard in the master plans from prior years. Adding to that context, we also looked at our other two centers identified earlier, including Old Trail Village and the Clover Lawn Shopping Center on Route 250. And some of the feedback we received is that these centers are distinct from downtown, both due to their distance. They're not really walkable. They're not really as well connected to downtown, and they're not as important as downtown. They're not, again, they don't fill the same, community-wide cultural aspect. They're not really a central place like downtown is. But we did get some feedback about improving connectivity within centers and between that we'll certainly take into consideration. That includes connecting Clover Lawn to the rest of Crozet more effectively, as well as Old Trail to downtown and other areas as well. These areas, we kind of talked about them being village centers, smaller areas within Crozet, still that serve activities for a village or a place, smaller scale than downtown, but still important centers on their own. In January and February, we did also talk about sort of rural edges on Route 250 conversation. This ties into Clover Lawn as well. We did hear a couple priorities from the community about preserving existing green space being a top priority in that area, continuing to kind of limit development in that area to what's possible under current zoning. We don't want to see too much intensification in that area, but also improving pedestrian connectivity kind of on this edge area, especially to the nearby schools, referring to Western Albemarle, Henley, and Brownsville, between Old Trail Drive and Crozet Avenue. Some difficulties for students accessing those schools right now. We did also hear about landscape buffers, again, kind of maintaining that visual edge in the master plan. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk more about some of the housing topics that came up in those months. But before I introduce housing, I do want to talk a little bit about how we've heard about housing throughout the master plan process so far. Honestly, a community is made of the people that live there and the people that work there. This focuses on the people that live in Crozet. And from our first workshop in September, we did hear a lot about really what we heard was a small town feel, neighborhood, community character, but also a desire for improving affordable housing access in Crozet, being a priority and a really major concern for the community. So in October, we kind of touched the subject a little bit, really digging into what the small town feel, both what it looked like and how it works. We had a discussion about missing middle housing at that point, which there are other housing types that might look more similar to what you see in a single family neighborhood, but offer a range of affordable options. So we've touched on this a few times and heard some interest in this topic, and we did use this to help frame some of our conversations in February as well, and how we talk about housing and how we talk about what it looks like and what density is. But we just want to reiterate that this is something we've heard a lot about as a focus in this master plan, and we've tried to respond to that the best we can. So in February, we did ask you all to, community members, to rank a couple of priorities related to planning in Crozet. particularly around neighborhood design and housing. I'll share the top 3 out. These might not be surprising to you all, but priorities really included, the top one from the community was really encouraging walkability and around our centers like downtown, Old Trail, and Clover Lawn that we just described. Improving access through those areas, but also helping people live in places that are walkable to the rest of the community. We heard a lot about form recommendations and the design of our neighborhoods and our housing being really important. We want to make sure that we had forms that are really responsive to what was already in the neighborhoods. So that might mean our historic architecture and design, factors like building size, lot placement, where the parking is, that are really important to how a neighborhood looks and feels. But our third priority we heard was also really allowing for a greater variety of housing types in Crozet. And so some of those missing middle types we've talked about a bit that are really look like a single family home and help meet that demand for walkable, affordable living. So again, these might be housing sizes that are smaller for a single household, but look like the houses that are nearby as well. So the picture of this is actually a couple of duplexes on Myrtle Street by Claudius Crozet Park as well. They look like the ranchers on the block, but in some ways they are like that missing middle housing. They look like what's nearby, but kind of blends in and provides a different type of housing than what's normally all around it. So in February, we talked about 2 kind of really abstract concepts as well, density and form, and had some interesting conversations about that as well. I think one of the next steps we have is to define what that looks like a little bit more, see what that looks like on the ground. But we did hear that, kind of a form topic, the size, shape, and scale of building is really a priority for how we plan in Crozet, especially with our historic neighborhoods, our existing neighborhoods, and make sure that new development is sensitive to what's already around. And that's not to say that density is not important. That's something we heard loud and clear, is that both of these things are really important. Density obviously is a major consideration for how we plan for schools and infrastructure needs in the community, and how we provide other services as a county. But in terms of how we determine what we want in our neighborhoods, form might have been one of the more appropriate priorities for the community, was what we heard. So we can talk more about that later, but just want to make sure we covered that as well. So we'll walk through just kind of at a high level, one group from the February workshop. For the most part, we're focusing at the high level right now, just the broad themes we heard before we get into the finer details in the next couple of months. But we do want to talk briefly about the group we call Northern Crozet in the February workshop. So that means the areas includes downtown, the areas around it, north of the railroad, and also the Hilltop Street, High Street area near Claudius Crozet Park. We did hear a lot about concerns about impacts to downtown redevelopment. So we all know that the Barnes Lumber redevelopment is moving forward. That'll be a pretty exciting change in the downtown area. But there were some concerns we heard about the impacts on adjacent neighborhoods, on affordability, on walkability as well. And so we wanted to make sure we acknowledge that. And we did hear a lot of importance about preserving these historic homes, preserving what's already there, the parts of the small town feel we really love, and make sure that our infill development is complementary to these neighborhoods as well. So both in terms of appearance and affordability, we heard those 2 concerns were really, really major concepts that we wanted to drive home with this. In the same group too, we did hear some interest about different types of housing that are permitted. And again, this focus on form. So some potential interest in bungalow courts, fourplexes, or kind of apartment conversions of existing homes, and other accessory units like you might see in Old Trail, these carriage houses and other sort of detached structures that might potentially provide a small apartment for folks as well. So that was a very quick recap of a lot of feedback we've heard, and just at a very high level. The feedback summaries you all have some more information about specifics about these different areas. But really, as we move forward into the coming months, we're going to start to focus more on location-oriented land use and housing recommendations that really comprise the meat of the master plan, the substance of it. So we want to have a chance to pause here as you all digest that, to have an opportunity to ask us about clarifying comments, share your thoughts on, I think, what we've heard so far, and if there's anything we might have missed based on your participation in these groups as well. We want to make sure that we're covering everything and really understanding the community. So I think we'll take a pause there because we love to hear your thoughts and what jumps out to you from all of this. So I'll turn it over to Allie.
Jenny, you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to, I guess I don't know if I should make the comment now or just keep it as we move through more discussion about land use and housing recommendations. But one of the breakout groups that I was in that had my neighborhood and Orchard Acres and Bargman Park, those neighborhoods going up, and Old Trail, we were asked about some new development and the request for more density than that which the master plan allows. And so as part of that conversation, I guess, in my mind, has to do with form and density and the existing neighborhoods that are around. So should I wait? Because I had a suggestion about how that was approached in our, and how we might approach it.
Andrew, what do you?
I think that's helpful feedback now.
Okay, so I won't take too much time on this, but in our group, because of where our neighborhoods were located, we were asked about Pleasant Green, possibility of 50 additional units on top of what they already have by right, which is pretty dense. And we did talk about form and density, and you all showed some pictures, that were attractive ways that, you can achieve density. And if you use form correctly, it can be attractive. But I think what I felt, and I don't know that others in the room felt that way, was how do we know that's what people would build? If we respond favorably to these images, you can pull images that are dense that aren't attractive. And then my suggestion would be about if the request for the 50 extra units is going to go forward in the master plan process, like, we can use a real life example, because we have Pleasant Green and they know what they would do if they got an extra 50 units on top of the 200 and however many they already have. With the space that they have, they'd have to go up. So I guess I just want to introduce that as an idea when we approach that question, is they would have to be taller than 35 feet. And so I think they have a 2/2 type of unit that maybe they could even show us pictures of that they build in Northern Virginia, and it's like 43 feet. And so I think if we're going to be asked the question, should there be extra density here, we can have, in this example, a real life, pictures of what does that look like, and what does that height look like to the older neighborhoods that are around it. And so that's something I think that would give people actual real information to answer if they think that would be appropriate or not, in addition to traffic and all the other considerations. So I think there's an opportunity there to ask a question and give a lot of detail, because you have a development that's already in phase 1 and there's only so much space. And then you can also talk about the pros, is if they have more density, then they could have more pocket parks and green space. So that's a bonus. It might be a bonus for just that neighborhood, but there are good reasons to do density. But the height piece is a big part of what the ask is, if you want to allow them to have more, which I think is a big consideration for all of Crozet, not just the neighboring properties. So I just wanted to put that out there as a real life example we can use as we move forward with fair. Go ahead.
I think that's great. I'm just wondering, just to clarify, are you asking if we can put like some kind of height, like how we would change, update the master plan to require, images or heights or something in these rezoning requests? Is that what you're kind of getting at? And you're just using this example?
Well, what I'm getting at is right now it's 35 feet. And so if you just ask people, hey, would you be okay with 50 extra units? And they say, sure. You need to also tell them that these extra units, because there's only so much space, will have to go up taller. So then they have to say, well, now it's okay to be 43 feet tall or 45 feet tall. And then you can actually, they can show images of what those type of units would look like with the already 35 feet tall townhomes. And then what does that look like next to the neighboring properties? So I'm just saying right now there is a rule and it's 35 feet. And in order, so the question isn't, can you have 50 more? It's, are you okay also with what that means and what that would look like? And in this example, we can show people what that would mean and look like, whereas in other examples, we don't know, what that might look like. This is a being built development. So that's my suggestion.
So maybe there's a way to add language to the plan that asks, that changes the wording of these height things and also asks for visuals when possible or something like that.
Well, I'm saying when you engage the community, you can show images that aren't just taken stock photos. You can show them images of what Stanley Martin's building and what it would look like, and when you ask the community, what do you think? Do people think this is a good idea, or do they not favor this idea? There's this, in this case, we can show exactly what that would be. And then it goes into the master plan or it doesn't. So I'm not saying it goes in the plan. I'm saying we can ask people, like, would you be more comfortable if density means the height goes up that much higher, and what does that look like? So that's
okay,
just
so
my
you're
point.
talking about specifically with this one.
Yeah, and I don't know, there were other ones that people were asking for more density, and I'm not familiar with
I
those
guess I'm just
I wasn't
also
in
like
those breakout
in
groups.
the
But I think there were
example
3 spots on the map.
in the example of the guy that was building the little pocket one on Orchard Drive, like he doesn't have, I mean, he wasn't asking, but like, a Stanley Martin would have products to show us, but a smaller developer wouldn't. And we do want to like encourage smaller developers to do projects. Anyway.
Yeah, so I guess I'll just respond to that real quick and just say that this is the first step in the master plan process towards developing more specific land use designations and recommendations about form as well. Because right now, I think the master plan is silent about height and form in most of the residential areas, besides some basic guidance on housing type and density in there. So I think that over the coming months, we'll have the chance to dig more into topics like height and massing as well. And I think using real world examples would be a great way to help make it seem more real. So I think that's feedback for us as we talk about this topic in the coming months. I think, understanding with you all tonight, what are some of the surprises or, are there any strong feelings as we move forward into developing what this looks like? I think this does help us inform our coming conversations.
Anne had something to say, Matthew had something to say, and Valerie also has her hand raised. And I also didn't get a chance to introduce Matthew, but he is our new committee member. So we'll get to that maybe when we get to internal business later. But I guess if you guys, I don't know if the hand raise goes away after a little while, or if you have changed your mind. So right now only Valerie has her. Anne, you still have something to say?
Yes, I was glad to hear about the discussion that Andrew had about preserving the historic homes and the small neighborhoods. And my question to be answered another time is, do we have the authority under current statute to do something to implement that other than just say we want it? Are there limitations that we can put on to older neighborhoods where all the houses are 800 square feet to say size and scale needs to be compatible, or the coverage of the lot or something like that? Some of the lots are very big, a half acre with a lovely little affordable house and a garden and, you know, space to breathe. So those are things that people in those neighborhoods really treasure, and they're very worried about losing them. In the old days, we used to require elevations, which would give us an idea about what things would look like. And I think anybody who's marketing to buyers is going to have that in their folder and be able to provide that. And the last thing is, I've been raising this at the board meetings for several months now, and we talked about it again on Wednesday, that accountability for what people say in a public hearing is something that we have to take more seriously, so that we don't have all these promises made at public hearings in order to get approval, and then people just walk away and do something else. And at site plan level, the staff has nothing to stand on because we didn't write specific conditions about it. So that's something that I would like you all to think about, and we will be working on that more going forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. Valerie?
Great, thank you. I was just going to raise the comment, and Jenny kind of spoke to this a little bit. I don't want to put words in her mouth, but it sort of helped me coalesce what I was trying to think, which is the priorities and the recommendations and comments that you heard that Andrew recited, and they all are positive and they all make sense. I could just see situations where it could create confusion or some internal conflicts. Respecting the form of historic neighborhoods is important. How do you reconcile that goal with increasing density and providing the missing middle housing options, housing equity issues, and the trade-offs that Jenny was talking about, that, sometimes higher might be better, maybe it's a case-by-case basis. Maybe some places density is better, others it's not. Maybe there's trade-offs that a neighborhood might decide would be worthwhile. So for my suggestion would be to just include some references somehow, but maybe not have such absolute language, but just recognize that all those goals are important, and that ideally projects would find the right balance on all of those issues and have very contextual applications, that, it's not one size fits all, but different neighborhoods have different priorities and preferences and specific needs. But I think generally just less absolute language.
Good. I don't see anybody else, but yeah, I agree with everyone's comments. And if that's it, then Andrew, you want to move forward?
Yeah, I can go ahead in a moment. So yeah, if anyone else wants to join, go ahead and unmute yourself. I'll also add too that I think that we are having some conversations about, especially in our historic neighborhoods. You all might have seen that, but there is a questionnaire that's live currently focused on architecture preservation in Crozet, and it really does focus on those historic neighborhoods around downtown, sort of 3 areas. And ask some questions about downtown design guidance, other residential areas within the Crozet Historic District, which are National Register listed properties. That's an honorary station, and some of the other neighborhoods near the park as well. So it does cover a pretty broad range of what really can be historic neighborhoods. Ask some questions and share some information about our kind of enabling authority under the state to do a more proactive preservation strategy, or as part of the zoning ordinance. So if you all are interested in that topic, I encourage you to check that out. And you can also access that through public input. But there's a lot of content in there. It talks a little bit more about other form concepts like massing, like outbuildings, lot placement, and so on. Pretty good overview, we think, of how we design our neighborhoods. So I'd encourage you all to take a look at that in the next couple weeks if you have a chance.
Thanks. We did have one comment from Tim on the public input site about about public hearings and promises made there, and that recording them should help to kind of get these promises into the formal record, I suppose. So I appreciate that comment, Tim.
Great. Well, I think that's everything for this topic. We'll move on to our final item, which is about the guiding principles and goals for the character chapter of the master plan. So I'll jump back to where we left off in November. That was the end of the first phase of the master plan process, where we heard a lot of really high level goals for Crozet. And from that comment we received in those 2 workshops in September and October, we provided a draft set of guiding principles and certain focus areas for the master plan. This included both the character chapter, our land use, our transportation and connectivity goals, our parks and green systems goals. So we outlined a couple of guiding principles, really vision statements for these chapters, and some other focus areas for each chapter that we really used to establish our structure for this phase of the process. We've really structured our discussions and the second phase of the process, which started in January, about on focus areas such as housing, such as preservation and form, about downtown vitality. And so we've really tried to use this to build out the master plan from there. So since that point, we've revised our character guiding principle based on the input we heard from Planning Commission, you all, the Board of Supervisors, and the input we've heard all spring so far, and turned our focus areas, which were just 1 or 2 words, just, hey, we need to talk about, affordable housing. We turn that into specific goals. So these goal statements were all on that last page of the packet that I share with you all. So I won't read them all verbatim, because I think we can all read, but I'll talk a little bit about the broad themes and the structure of it all. So this graphic we share with you in November, but this is kind of just a diagram that shows how these topics all sort of relate to each other at a really high level. At the top is, for each chapter, we have a guiding principle. That's a vision statement. It's very aspirational and visionary, but not as specific, as detailed as a recommendation might be. We've really started to develop our goals. Those are what we also call our focus areas. And these focus more on specific topics or themes. Like we mentioned, affordable housing being one, downtown being a focus area. And we started to provide more language towards what we want to see based on the feedback we've heard in the process. From these goals, we really use these to structure our master plan document. These are the goals that the staff use when we evaluate a master plan or a rezoning or special use permit proposal. These are kind of the different parts of the master plan we look at. And it's kind of our goalpost for how we evaluate development in Crozet. So later on in the process, we'll continue to develop specific recommendations from this point. And that includes location-specific areas. The land use map is a type of recommendation for this is an appropriate place for this type of housing. It includes specific action items, changes that we might want to make, and specific maybe capital projects. So build a sidewalk here would be a recommendation and not a goal or principle. And I guess this slide kind of recaps that again. So again, starting from the top, our vision statement, our goals are our focus areas and themes. And then in the future, we'll continue to develop specific actions and policies and locations. So tonight we're focusing on those upper 2 items, the guiding principle and the goals for this chapter. So again, this is what we're calling the character chapter of the master plan. That's kind of how we've approached the topic in some of our recent documents about land use. But it's the same thing as your land use chapter in the prior master plan, essentially. So our first guiding principle for the character chapter, might see some changes from what you saw in November, but again, rarely recognizing this vision of Crozet as a self-sustaining small town, really welcoming development that is compatible with that history and that scale. And again, this housing topic that we've talked about. And that's our guiding principle. It's a high level vision statement. Here's all the things we want to do. Here it touches on a little bit of each topic. but we would not necessarily evaluate a development proposal against this statement. But it helps provide a framework for us to, you know, what we aspire to in our development. Our first two goals talk a little bit about our centers. This kind of lines up with that January workshop where we talked about, you know, downtown, Old Trail, and so on. The first statement we have is really about just our mixed use centers, the places where we go to, we walk from our neighborhoods to shop or get essential services. We certainly want to continue to support a mix of uses in our designated centers, these places that are supposed to be important. And in reference to some of the feedback we heard this fall, we did add a, we did call out downtown on its own as a really center that stands apart, again, where the county has provided a lot of support to force revitalization. And the special role it plays as kind of the historic and cultural heart of Crozet, as well as the most urban space in Crozet. So these two kind of touch on our broad centers and kind of our commercial mixed use areas in Crozet. These two talk a little bit more about our residential areas and our housing. The first one we talked about historic preservation and reuse. It touches on our desire to reuse existing buildings. We don't want to see them be torn down, recognizing that there are potential advantages for affordability that come from it. And they really contribute to the character of our neighborhoods as they exist right now. You know, these old houses, these old buildings are part of the, you know, Crozet small town feel and its unique character. Once they're gone, we can't really get them back. So stating that there's a concerted goal to encourage their reuse and continued existence and viability. And then also talking about providing housing for Crozetians at all income levels. We did talk about our downtown, our center, the services and other shops we want to see there, but also make sure that housing goes hand in hand with the jobs that are available in Crozet. Supporting service workers, first responders, teachers, and everyone that wants to live in Crozet. Make sure that there's a fair chance for them to be able to be a part of the community. And this topic, again, touches more on infill development specifically, about what's new, but really constructing new and infill development so it fits into what's around there. The existing neighborhoods, making sure it conforms to kind of community expectations and respects the historic architecture in these areas as well. So there are three broad topics that really focus in on our neighborhoods, how they change over time, and how they're accessible to everyone. Our last two goals talk more about the sense of place in Crozet. So these are a little less about land use, a little bit less about new construction, but again, more about what the spirit of Crozet is. It talks about, the first goal talks about the artisan community and kind of the cultural, the placemaking part of the work we do, indicating that as a community, we support efforts that create, contribute to its culture, contribute to an understanding and celebration of the community's history, and a better understanding that, and that, you know, placemaking projects and partnerships might be a way to support that moving forward. And the master plan should call that out as something we've heard. We also want to distinctly call out the rural edge of Crozet, though, and that being another goal that we want to aspire to based on the feedback we heard in January and February. Maintaining a distinct rural edge around the boundary areas of Crozet. Again, providing that visual connection that we've heard, but also its, you know, its relationship to the rural area. That distinct rural edge is important to defining what is developed in Crozet and then what is, you know, the surrounding countryside that we really value in the community. So as a reminder from there, these are all really high level concepts, just broad themes we've tried to distill based on a whole lot of feedback received. And for each of these goals and focus areas, we'll continue to develop specific recommendations about what exactly that rural edge looks like, what it should look like on the 250 edge or versus on Lanetown Road, and develop the specifics of what these all look like. But for tonight, we want to ask you all to kind of weigh in on what we've brought out to you so far. Just help us know if we're on the right track, if we're looking at the right community priorities here. So we want to ask you all to weigh in on if you feel that any focus areas are missing. Again, we heard a little bit about that in the fall. We added one for downtown and tried to provide some specificity where we felt it was needed. But I just want to hear your thoughts and comments, questions, clarifications on what we've brought out to you so far. I'm also happy to jump back to specific points for discussion if you all have access to the agenda materials. It's also in there as well. So I'll turn it over to Allie, and I'm also happy to answer any questions you all have.
Yeah, I just texted the link to those materials again to their in the group chat. If anyone has trouble, let me know. And I see Joe has a comment.
Yeah, thanks, Allie. Andrew, I had two sort of two wording things, one suggestion for the goals recommendations, and then a thought to jump back to. The first one is in the guiding principle. And I know these are kind of small, like wording things, but when I read that the first time, the word welcoming kind of jumped out at me, right? Welcoming new development. And I'm kind of imagining the typical crozation, that we've seen and that comes to these meetings. And I don't know that most people would describe their attitude as we welcome new development, right? I mean, and certainly I don't think that's the focus of the guiding principle. It's not about how much we're welcoming. It's welcoming new and infill that's compatible, of course. I just think that word just sort of struck me as a little bit off, inconsistent with the way that the community kind of feels, right? I don't know what the better word is. Permit, allow, tolerate. I don't know, but welcoming just sort of seemed a little off. The other thing,
Hey,
and
Joe.
this might be kind of along a similar line. Oh, yes, sorry, Doug, I think.
Yeah, I was just going to offer open to, while open to new and infill development, that it's compatible in scale and design.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, something along those lines.
What do you
Yeah,
think,
permit,
Joe?
allow, something like that. What's that?
Yeah, I agree. I hear you. Maybe it sounds a little forced if you imagine, reality. That word. Go on, Joe. What else did you have?
The other one, Andrew, that I had. Sure. No, the other one in the second bullet point, distinctively urban design, when referring to the downtown area. And again, maybe Doug is the better one to weigh in here, but and this may be more of just like a land use kind of, like a, urban obviously in like the land use has a particular context, but I think again, just reading as a person, I hear urban, I think dense, modern, right? Which again, I don't know if distinctively urban design necessarily captures what most people think that they would want to see in downtown Crozet, which is, obviously developed and new things, but also with an eye towards that consistent historical small town feel. I don't know, distinctively urban design just jumped out at me, making it sound like, glass and steel. That's what jumped out at me. One other thought,
I guess,
in terms of, oh, Doug, yeah.
I would agree and say, I think you could take out that clause with distinctively urban design. Just put your period right there at heart of Crozet. And I think you've kept yourself open to most good options.
Andrew, one other thought is, I know that you focused on this in the priorities about the connectivity. And I know that we're going to get into that in other aspects, but I don't think I saw any reference to connectivity in these goals or recommendations. So I don't know if there's a way to kind of, work them in at some point. If there's a way to weave that idea, because I think you're right. It was a huge thing that came up in a lot of these meetings, and it certainly came up over and over again. And I don't know exactly the best bullet points. It may be a mixture of uses. I don't know if it goes in the centers of activity, connected, or somewhere else. maybe it's in the bullet point 4 about the neighborhood fabric, and maybe that works kind of like bringing together, I don't know, something there. Those are my 3. Actually, Allie, if it's all right with you, but I'll leave it there. I have another point. It goes back to something that we talked about earlier, but I can circle back if other people have specific things on the guiding principles and goals and recommendations. I'll hold off on that. I'll bring that up, right before we take off.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, I appreciate the comments. We've got just Anne and then Jenny. Go ahead, Anne.
Okay, goody, I am unmuted. Thank you. The infill is a dangerous thing. I think it's where our biggest problem is going to be happening. I'm turning off my video because it says my internet is unstable. All right, so how do we and this is a question to leave on the table for the staff and Andrew, is how do we prevent in the future what has happened to Blue Ridge Avenue in our master plan? Because it's the oldest street in town and it is forever changed. So I think there are some, as people have already mentioned, there are specific things that jump into people's minds when they hear certain terms. I agree with both the other comments about the welcoming thing, because from 30-year-olds to 90-year-olds, people say make it stop when it comes to new population. So that's just what I'm hearing more of now. So anyway, that's the sort of careful thing. And the only other, I loved your sense of place, artisans, rural edge, but I think that bringing artisans, placemaking, and history of agriculture, bringing that's what connects the rural hard edge with the rural area, is the farming right outside. And the fact that Crozet was the peach capital of the United States back in the 1870s. So we need to take a grab on that and not let it get away. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. Jenny, what did you have?
I think Anne touched on this just now and then before as well. And I think when we talk about the infill and the, whether a neighborhood's historic or not, when it's compatible with size and scale, I think if it's, the way Andrew described it in our guiding principles, it's sort of this higher level idea that is important to people, but it also sounded like that isn't something, that an application might necessarily be held against. And I think, to be fair to the community and to, existing residents and new residents, we need to be honest about what we can and can't do to protect neighborhoods from infill, because I hear a lot about this size and scale, and yet we've seen it happen in places where there's nothing anyone could do to stop that from happening. So I think to be fair to everyone, I think it is very important, but we need to be honest about what that means and, what the county's role is in protecting historic structures, or even just, older neighborhoods that might not be compatible with some of the things that are being built. So I like having it in there. I just think we need to be honest about what that means and doesn't mean, so people aren't disappointed with that as the guiding principle. To me, that's like our core values. When I think of guiding principles, can you guys hear me? My internet's
Yeah, no,
to me, that's like
I hear you.
Okay, so that to me, that's the guiding principles are like, this is, everything that is the most important to us. And if we're going to look at those as sort of high level, we wish that it could be that way, but it may not always be that way. I think we need to be honest in the way that it's written in the final version, that's what those mean. That's all I have.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, not just aspirational. So I don't have anybody else with a hand raised, but if anybody who hasn't shared anything yet, do you guys have anything you want to add or just chime in about? And there's one comment from public input. I welcome new development. Without it, how do you have affordable housing? I guess that's in response to Joe's comment. Yeah, I think we do. I think it was just a matter of the word choice. And that's definitely open to debate. Because we do want to attract affordable housing. So that's something we have to reconcile with, you know, existing residents. So anybody else? I see Joe. You want to respond to that?
As Brian, I'd like to jump in when I get a chance.
Sure, great. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I'll take a back seat because I'm going to jump back to something that came up earlier in the presentation. So
Okay,
step
yeah, Brian, go ahead.
Okay, I just wanted to, that over and over and over again in the public meetings, people talk about connectivity, walkability, bikeability. And I think in our overall guiding principles that needs to be in the forefront, just because it comes up every single meeting. And so I just wanted to reinforce that. Thanks.
Thanks, yeah. Jenny?
I wanted to just kind of comment back to the affordable housing piece and welcoming new development. And I think like Allie said, that all that language tweaking is what we're here to do and what we'll continue to do. And I think part of what, I don't have the numbers with me, I wish I did, and Tom Loach is actually, he's not here, but helped me get some of this information that how many affordable units have been built in Crozet since we started building, and then it's hard to track how many of those have been lost because of the different ways that affordable housing is handled. If a affordable unit goes on the market and stays, I don't know if it's, Andrew maybe can help me, if it's 3 or 4 months and if a family isn't found or a buyer isn't found, then it just goes back to market rate. And there's different things. I think the county has tried to look at ways we can redo our affordable housing policy so we can, you know, give some teeth to what we're doing with affordable housing. And I think that's a huge piece that needs to come together with not just our master plan, but countywide. Because we can talk about having affordable units all the time, but if we're losing them, then, you know, I don't know, then we're not doing it right. So that was just my comment about.
And if we're welcoming new development with the goal of affordable housing, we have to make sure that it's not, you know, 2 years later turned back into market rate unaffordable housing. So did anybody else that hasn't chimed in have anything to say, or we could go back to Joe's other comment? Okay, why don't you go ahead, Joe?
Okay, thanks, Allie. And this doesn't relate directly, Andrew, to the guiding principles. It comes up just before that. I did notice that in the housing focused conversations, you laid out some sort of broader sort of things that were adjacent. And one of the things that came up was local tax and fiscal policy. And I couldn't tell if from the revised schedule, I think we were scheduled to have a workshop on implementation, and it looks like we may not have a separate meeting on that. And so my thought here was just recognizing these challenges, obviously, of rising tax rates, putting pressure, you know, when we do it countywide, it puts pressure on people, especially with fixed incomes. And in a post-COVID economy, we are certainly having fiscal challenges. Exploring very seriously the idea of a service district or a community improvement district in Crozet as a way of helping to implement some of these, you know, really important things. whether it's sidewalks, public parking, transportation services, beautification, economic development. So many of the things that come up over and over again at our meetings that we want to do, ultimately at the end of the day, they take money. And so, as I say, I wanted to bring it up because it was in this packet, and I don't know if we were going to have a separate implementation discussion. So at some point, I'd love to, have a deeper conversation about that.
Thanks, Joe. And I also just want to say thank you for reading the packet. I don't see anybody else. What do you think, Andrew?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. My screen's still shared, so I had to find it. So I guess, so Joe, I think to respond to your implementation workshop question, that was one we did put on the diagram, I think, as in potentially July or August. So I think we know right now that there's still a lot of uncertainty about what comes next with COVID. I think, when we scope this out, we're hoping that we might be able to be back open, meeting in person by the late summer. But I think we scoped out a placeholder for when that workshop would be. That might be an online format, but I think we still intend to have some sort of discussion with the community about really the summary of this entire process to date, the implementation projects and policies and tools we have to get there. And also hopefully some prioritization of capital projects. As you mentioned, we are certainly constrained in a lot of ways with what we can do under our enabling authority and with the current economic situation. But I think we are planning to have a workshop focused on that later in the summer. We haven't quite established when that will be or what that will look like yet, but that is certainly a priority for us as we wrap up this stage of the process. And thank you for reading the packet.
I don't know if the staff members have any other comments from the public input site, from anybody watching. But we did sort of skip over the topic of, are committee members comfortable with these virtual meetings? And we also have elections to deal with. So Andrew, did you want to address those questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I realized we moved that topic to the back of today's discussion.
Okay, good.
I'll just go through it first. I don't think I passed it on to you, so I apologize for that.
That's okay.
So I think we are ending about 10 minutes earlier than planned, which is awesome. I think we know that these are different format, different level of focus required from us. So I think, I want to spend this last little bit of time to check in with you all about how you thought this went and your comfort level with doing these meetings moving forward. We are certainly still learning and want to know what works best for you all. And as Ali mentioned, we do have, as we meet online, we still will probably have other business we need to take care of, like our elections, like approving minutes and so on. This is obviously our first advisory committee meeting, our first kind of pilot test of all of this. Much as something to consider in the coming months if we are interested in continuing this. We do have elections that were supposed to be in April, and we might need to think about if and when we want to do that. But we certainly open any feedback, and would like to have a discussion with you all right now about how this went and how you all want to move forward.
I'll start, but I would love for some other committee members to weigh in. I think it's great that we're able to get some work done, and I think that this does have some advantages, like you mentioned, about people who can't come to meetings to be able to participate. When we live streamed meetings before, it didn't really help, or with live tweeting this way with the public input, we can really have comments and just a new like fair and moderated and way. So I appreciate that. And I do think that we need to do elections because it's a little awkward for me to like continue being chair without without being elected to the position. I don't and same with Mike and Sean in their roles. So I would hope that we can do some kind of nomination and some kind of vote through this format. And I also skipped over introducing ourselves, which we would normally do in the meeting. So I think next time I will ask everybody to just, rather than just reading the names, but we'll introduce ourselves like we would in the meeting, and maybe say our neighborhood again, like we would. But Anne, you have something to add?
Yes, didn't we have a slate discussion for leadership at the last in-person meeting, but we didn't have enough people to act on it? And do we have a quorum now? In which case, can we do that?
That's true. I think we had planned on voting in April, and people were supposed to nominate, send any nominations to you in the meantime. So I don't know if you got any, but we do have a quorum, so we could do that now if people are comfortable, or if Andrew wants to weigh in.
I did not receive any volunteers or anybody other than keep the same people going.
Cool.
If they're willing, that's all.
I don't know.
So I'll move the slate as proposed.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
I think that was Josh.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
One opposed. Okay. Super duper.
Are we sure that Mike wants to still be the secretary? Or is gonna ram this through?
When he has to quit, we'll have to find a replacement, but he has to be the big boy and say when he's done.
And meeting minutes, I guess, will be easier since these recording, these are going to be recorded on the county website. So we could definitely have
those done. Yeah. How do you want that done then?
Yeah. What do you, yeah, well, I feel like Mike's minutes could be pretty broad, not detailed.
Well, I've heard he really loves doing it, so.
There you go.
Just to ask the group, were this both your second terms doing this, Ally and Mike?
This would be my third year. I've done 2 years as chair.
Okay. So I'm looking at the CAC rules procedure, and just to double check. So chairs and vice chairs may not serve more than 2 consecutive terms. So Ally, you might be term limited. Secretary can be elected for a 1-year term, but maybe elected for 1 or more additional terms. So
just to clarify, is a term 1 year or the term of my CCA position?
1-year term.
So okay.
Max of 2 years, term limited.
So we might need to have, and that would apply to Sean too, because he did 2 years. So unless we might need to give somebody a chance to volunteer for these roles.
Yeah, I think, just in terms of, it's already almost 8:30 in the evening, and we kind of a last minute discussion. Would we all be comfortable pushing this off to next month? And I think submitting a slate, because I think we do need to talk a little bit about this some more, and it is late at night. So I think just in terms of the appearance, I feel like I'd be more comfortable doing it next month.
Yeah, that works for me. And I think clarifying that rule was important. So
I'll pass along this document to everyone.
So
So-
so that means that we need a volunteer for probably all 3 positions. And I'll go ahead and run the June meeting like I did this one. And then we can figure out who's going to take over.
I have a clarification question for Andrew. So can the vice chair become the chair, or do we need whole new people altogether? Because it would seem sensible that someone who's been vice chair might be able to move up to chair if he was willing. So something to think about before we
Yep.
get stuck at the last minute with this. So, and other people
Yeah.
need to speak up and say, I'd like to do this. So please don't be shy.
I agree.
Yeah, I think before, I guess I didn't know about the term. I knew there were term limits, but I didn't know it was 2 because there was a time where we were having trouble getting
Yeah.
people to want to do it. So I think that my understanding was that the vice chair could move into the chair role, and that wouldn't be subject to the term limit for his role as vice chair if that's what people wanted. But I guess we're back to, if we're going to push this off, do we want people still to reach out to Anne with
I think it makes,
Well, I'll say this. I mean, certainly I would consider it. But if anyone else is really chomping at the bit, and I'm very serious about this and would like to do it instead, it will not hurt my feelings at all if anyone wants to throw their hat in the ring. So definitely do so, or just contact me sort of outside of this forum, and we can discuss. But honestly, I'll do it if I'm the default, but if someone really wants to step up, have at it. It's certainly a position that needs full dedication that, like Ally is given. So
We have Joe and Ann and Jenny all have their hand raised, and I also just wanted to read, I think this comment must be from Tim Tolson, that elections should be on the agenda, before we vote, which I agree with. And but I just wanted to talk about it tonight, since it was supposed to be on the April agenda, or it would have been. Joe, did you want to say something?
Oh, my only point was that the rules of procedure allow us to amend the rules of procedure. So if we wanted to eliminate the term limits, we actually could do that. Although we have to give notice and do it at the next meeting, but that doesn't seem any more efficient. At this point. So,
No, that makes sense. Well, I guess we'll just have to see who volunteers, and if I'm happy to continue. I just don't want to go on any kind of I just want it to be legit. And if other people want to volunteer, I will be very happy to hand over the responsibility. I mean, I'm pretty sure previous chairs have done more than 2 years, so it certainly wouldn't.
Well, then why don't I do this? Because the rules of procedure say that we can amend a rule of procedure by majority vote, but we have to give notice of the motion to amend at the previous meeting. So look, I will go ahead and give formal notice that I intend to amend the procedural rules to adjust the term limits for chair and vice chair. And then if we don't end up doing it next meeting, we don't end up doing it next meeting. But
great.
I will give formal notice that we plan to move that motion to amend.
Do we have a second?
Second, Brian here.
And point of order, if Andrew would please research that 2-year term for officers is not something that is part of our charter.
But under Joe's logic, under Joe's logic, we should be able to amend that or clarify that.
That's what I would like clarified.
No, that's a good point. It appears in the rules of procedure, but I think, yeah, it's exactly right. If it's in the charter or something, then yeah, that would obviously trump whatever we have here.
The rules of procedure, I think, are, you know, for each or for every CAC, they're the same for everyone. I don't know if a group's amended theirs in the past, but somehow this does not surprise me.
Well, I mean, I know
I
just,
don't think, go ahead.
I just, yeah, there's definitely other CACs with chairs who have been chairs for more than 2 consecutive years also. So just based on my experience as a member of a CAC.
Okay.
So I don't know if we need to vote on all in favor of Joe's.
Well,
motion
I don't think it's
potentially-
actually a motion. It just says
Okay.
that I have to give notice of the motion to amend.
Okay, so it's just notice, not a motion. Okay.
It will be addressed next meeting, possibly. So,
Okay.
Anyway, all right.
So
Well, we don't want to drag this
and
on.
it's 8:35. So
yeah, so we'll have an opportunity for to email us input on how this meeting went and ways you think we can improve it. I'll go back to listen to the recording from this meeting for the minutes and help make sure that's all clear. I've only been in my position with the county for 2 years next month, so I've not quite reached the term limit for everyone else, and I'll have to do a little bit of asking around about how we've done this for other groups before. But we'll make sure that it goes around. I'll send some information out to you all, and we'll plan to address officer elections at the next meeting agenda, and probably catch up on other minute approvals as well. But I think, you know, it's 8:35, so I think we've covered our material for tonight. I really, again, thank you all for your patience and flexibility in adapting to this tonight. For the folks that are watching at home on public input or tweeting at us, please also make sure you leave comments on public input so we can know what your thoughts are as well. It's not the perfect substitute for usual public comment at one of the CAC meetings, but I think we're doing our best, and we appreciate you all leaving your thoughts with us. So with that said, I think that covers everything. I think, Allie, I had an announcement on there for you to share.
Yes, so our next meeting is tentatively scheduled for June 10th, again at 7 p.m. And we'll have the same opportunities for the public to access and participate in the electronic meeting. And the link will be posted at a later date in accordance with Emergency Ordinance number 20-A6 and open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And that's it. I think our meeting is adjourned. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night.
Stay safe.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Hey, Andrew,
Mhm.
you still there?
Yeah.
Yes.
So let me clarify this. This recording is gonna be the official or constitute the official minutes, or are minutes required to be based upon this video call? What should be done?
I believe we're required to post the recording of the meeting as well as the chat log as well as part of the public record. I think we probably still need to do some minutes, I think a very high level, some minutes of
Okay.
everyone that was in attendance would